Good evening. I am Mayor Mike Wickers, and myself and the City Council welcome you to the January 18th, 2022 business meeting for the Cottonwood Heights City Council. We wanted to begin tonight with a pledge of allegiance that we've asked Council Member Sean Newell to lead us in. Rise. Thank you. Appreciate that. So the next item on our agenda tonight is an acknowledgement that we're going to have our Cottonwood Heights Police Department Sergeant Tazoy discuss an Autism Awareness Award. We're going to, if you want to come up. Thank you.
Sergeant, push the button on there. I don't think you're on.
What would I do without Matt? So yeah, Sergeant Tazoy, I'm the administrative sergeant for the police department. And what that means is essentially part of my role is with training, dealing with training, which will kind of tie into how I know Ms. Smith here. But also I have the ability to administer and put together certain programs like the one that we'll talk about as well. But first of all, I want to give you all a little bit of background to how we got to be where we're at, just so you kind of have some understanding. So Chief Russo asks that we as police officers provide a high level of service for the citizens of Cottonwood Heights, rightfully so, right? Small ask. And we know that part of that high level of service is professionalism, and along with that professionalism is appearance, right? So we in the law enforcement family have a term that is officer presence, and boiled down to its most simplistic form, as you can imagine, that means just an officer being present. So for example, that means like me as an officer just being in a convenience store or a store, Target, for example, could be the sole difference between a shoplifter stealing the candy that he or she was going to take, right? And so that appearance, is cleanliness, is dress, and also, of course, whether or not I could beat the suspect in the foot race comes into play as well, right? And so Chief Russo believes that the clean shave is part of that appearance. Now, don't get me wrong, I came from the public sector, or rather private sector before, and I love my beard. And excuse me, I think I shed a tear or two and I had to shave it off to begin with, but I digress. Nonetheless, Chief Russo thinks that clean shave is part of that professional appearance. And so a couple years ago, after others apparently had tried, we were successful in getting Chief Russo to approve a fundraiser campaign, as long as it met his stipulation that it goes to a good local cause. And at the time, 2 years ago, we, as a department, unfortunately, were struck with a couple of officers' families having some tragedies. And so we took the money, split it between those two families, and to help them with these events that they were going through. Now, this last year, fortunately, we didn't have those same kinds of tragedies. And so it didn't take long for us to decide that we wanted to involve or donate to the money to the Autism Council of Utah. And so just really quickly, I don't want to take up too much time, of course, but a couple of years ago as well, Ms. Smith, who is a resident of Cottonwood Heights, reached out to me as the training coordinator and asked how we as a department might handle a call involving somebody with autism. And so I thought that that was a great opportunity to ask her to come up here and to provide us with some training to, of course, aid us or to have in the tool belt to, ensure that it is a good resolution for everyone. And essentially, we were kind of like a guinea pig test case for her that she took to the Attorney General's office and ultimately to the legislation to get it passed to where law enforcement agencies across the state now require mental health and autism training as part of that. So, and Ms. Smith has also come up and helped us with a couple of other trainings as well as a bystander and as a given critique to the certain role-playing scenarios that we use and so forth. So that's a little bit of the background on how we came to be with this. It's a no shave event. We try to include our record staff, our civilian staff, and the females as well, of course, because they can't grow the beards, but painting nails or dyeing the hair, jeans for record staff, stuff like that. So get that all together. And this year, fortunately, we do have the opportunity of presenting Ms. Cheryl Smith here with a check, $1,700 from the Cottonwood Heights fundraising. So thank you. No, appreciate it. Appreciate everything you've done. Do you anything?
I just want to say, we have fabulous officers in Cottonwood Heights. I've been up here and spent a lot of time with them, and they're amazing. And they had me up here well before they had to. So I'm really proud to be a resident of Cottonwood Heights. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Tazoy. Thank you. We don't get enough opportunities to see this type of thing as a regular citizen. And I'm grateful for what you are all doing and to reaching out to the community and being involved and raising money. I mean, I cannot speak highly enough of these great efforts. And I know it starts at the top with Chief Russo, but thank you for all that you did. And thank you for coming tonight. That was a great opportunity.
Thank you.
And I want to mention that I met with the Smiths and the Mennings and some others that have those that have children that we worry about with autism, and what our officers, their knowledge of different things like that is so important to a response. And I just love the fact that Chief Russo makes that a priority to have those very important measures trained so that you know what to do and what to expect, because there are a lot of dynamics of what you come upon. And this is one of them. And I'm so grateful for what you do for our city, because we do have an amazing force. But thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Our next item tonight is a citizen comment period. I do not see any comments requested, correct?
No, there's none. You can open it up and see if there's anyone online or that's here at the meeting would like to do that.
There is anyone here or online that would like to comment, please feel free to raise your hand online or come on up. Okay, we will close the citizen comment period. The next item on our agenda tonight is staff reports. And the first thing that we will do is hear from our city Finance and Administrative Services Director, Scott Jurgis.
Okay. Make sure I can see it. If you can't hear me well, I can take my mask off as I'm talking. So just let me know if something's not coming across well. So I wanted to start with a couple things. First, this is our city website, the main front page of it, and under your government, and then down here under finance or budget and financial reporting, you can come into here and there are several sections. One is monthly financial reports. Another is annual financial statements. Another is the popular annual financial reports. Looks like we need to get that font a little bit bigger. And then we have our annual operating and capital budget. Excuse me. And what I wanted to show you, this relates to the December 2021 financial report. So if you were to click on this, it would bring up the report that gets sent out to you each month as part of the council communications. And I think it was last week that you got the last one, if I remember correctly. Sometimes my weeks blur together, so I might misspeak a week or so. But in this, there's a little narrative that will go through different aspects of the finances for the month. And then it will have the financial statements, if you will, for the month, so that you can kind of see where we are and how we compare to our budget. And it will go through each of the funds, the general fund first, and then other funds as well. I'm going to stop sharing on this particular one for the moment. And in our quarterly, excuse me, updates to you, we typically go over mainly revenues. I'll also go over expenses on a high level, but if there was something that was causing me angst or concern, I would definitely specifically go over that. But revenues, especially in the latest, couple of years here that we've been going, we've been concerned where are sales taxes going? Because that's our main revenue that fluctuates with the economy, and we wanted to know how we were doing. So I'm going to share my slides here. Use that down. Okay. So to start out with, I'm going to start with our sales taxes. So sales taxes are run about 2 months behind. We will get our November sales taxes around the 21st of this month. So near the end of this week, we'll get those. But we know what our sales taxes are through October. Sales taxes are distributed to us through the Utah State Tax Commission, and they come into us. And so through October, we're 33% through the year, and we've received 37.53% of our budget at this point in time. More importantly than our budget, I think, is a measurement to what we received the prior year. The prior year, we were just under $7.9 million. And as of October, we were $272,000 better than what we were last year. And we might say, oh yeah, that's great. And it is great. It's a little concerning to me because I'm like, because we had a big uptick last year, and is this going to continue? Where are we going with this? And so on and so forth. And I don't really know. And as I've listened to a lot of economic updates and forecasts and different things like that go on, I try and get on the Zions Bank, which is our bank provider, economic update every month when they do one. It's blowing them away a little bit, the volatility, the positive volatility of our economy right now. So, we watch that, and it is a good thing. I'd rather tell you that we're $300,000 ahead of where we were last year than $300,000 behind where we were last year, especially on sales tax. But you can see that our budget, when we set this, and we came up with this number, $7.2 million in about at the end of April last year. So it's nearly a year back, about 9 months back. And obviously that's low. We're probably going to be more like in the $8 to $8.2 million if I was going to guess at this point in time for an ending level. So we will come in the year better than what we were budgeted in our sales taxes. So that's a good thing. Are there any questions related to sales tax?
So I wanted to mention that to the rest of the council, that this number that we look at under sales tax is really, really important. Like you said, it's the most volatile that can go up and down. We don't have to wait for Scott's quarterly report. Our city manager, Tim Tingy, sends out a council communication to us, and once a month we'll get this number. And it's really something that we should be waiting in anticipation to see, because like Scott said, we need to know this is what can really affect our budget. And as long as the number that was in the report, Scott, is 11% ahead of last year, which is just tremendous. And like you said, it's a little bit concerning that it's going to continue. But the reason that I think it's so important to watch this closely, if we do see a downtick in the economy, this is where we might see this number go down, which is why we need to pay such close attention to it. So,
and the sales taxes may end up being higher than our property taxes for the first time this year. Our property taxes are right about $8 million. And if this goes up above $8 million some, it truly may end up being our #1 revenue source this year for the first time. And property taxes and sales taxes make up about $16 million of our total revenue on about a $21 million total general fund budget. So when you look at it that way, we're heavily dependent on sales taxes and property taxes. And property taxes, we don't get a lot of increase in property taxes. And we'll go over some of that next week when we meet for council retreat. But yeah, we do depend on this being healthy. So any other questions? Okay. So second item is county option highway transportation sales tax. And this is a sales tax that was instituted in fiscal year 2020. It went out by vote of the county. And if the county voted for it, then everybody would receive this. And this was approved at that point in time. Initially, we budgeted it at 600,000 each year. We were slightly low in 2020, slightly over in 2021. In 2022, we're tracking about 27,000 ahead of 2021. So we'll likely be ahead of our budget a little bit. And this follows very similar to the sales tax trends, but instead of having the shared component throughout the whole state, this has a shared component that's just amongst the county. So the numbers and the percentages of growth year over year will be slightly different than what they will on sales tax.
That's shared by lane mile or by,
So this one is shared, I believe that the calculation is 50% point of sale and 50% population, but it's just the population within Salt Lake County on this particular one. Where on the main sales tax here, it's 50% point of sale and 50% relative population to the whole state of Utah. So since our population to the whole state of Utah is going to be different than it is comparatively speaking here in the county, that will affect that calculation a little bit.
Hey, Scott, I've got a quick question for you. Do you ever confer with some of the other cities, their revenues, their trends to see if we're probably not unique in this way. Obviously, we love these numbers. The question I have, and we've always kind of had, is where online sales we know has helped greatly. Are there other factors that we can rely on in some kind of form or fashion that we can kind of rely on for the future trend?
Well, that's hard to know for sure.
I know some of it's not
Yeah.
reportable. I know there's for the businesses, but
If you're heavily reliant on tourism during the early stages of COVID and the pandemic, your economy really suffered. Basically, the term I heard is if you had a ski resort in your area, you were down on sales taxes early in the pandemic. That has now changed and is not quite that same effect. And I haven't necessarily heard any other anecdotes that go along with that. In a general sense, throughout the state of Utah, we're very positive. There may be a minor exception in there, but in a general sense, we're very positive throughout the state of Utah. And especially because I'll say the staycation kind of things where you're staying in your local communities versus going way out. So instead of like, say, a cruise, maybe you decided to go to Moab, or instead of, I don't know, whatever else that you do, say going to New York City, you're staying home and you're going to, Canyonlands National Park or something like that. I don't know. Whatever it is that you're doing, there's a lot more of that happening. And I think that even other surrounding states are coming here too, which is helping us in some ways. But as you said, online sales are very, very strong. And so we're definitely helped from that. Grocery sales are very strong. And then home improvement sales are another area that's very strong. And those are general statements, not just for our city, but general statements throughout.
I know that some of the cities that had strong hotels that they relied on, a lot of those were almost shut down during the strength of the first pandemic.
Yeah.
I know grocery sales were crazy.
Mhm.
I'm just hoping that in future development for our city, if we can get some of those positive factors that would have legs, so to speak, even after this pandemic is over, is wonderful for our city to be able to know what we can spend, what we can do, and to continue this strong financial and fiscal responsibility that we so benefit from.
I would say anything that generates sales locally is a good thing. Restaurants are one of the big ones, and they did suffer, the restaurant community did. And they're coming back, but I think that they still have a little bit of a ways to go to get back to pre-pandemic levels. But that's an area where I think we'll see some recovery in as we move out. So.
Thank you.
Next slide here is energy taxes. So this is a tax that is applied to a percentage tax that's applied to the sale of either power. So Rocky Mountain Power is our predominant power supplier, or gas. And the predominant gas supplier would be Dominion Energy, but there are a handful of other smaller providers throughout the city. And this goes out and assesses a 3.5% tax to those bills as it goes out. You can see that last year we ended the year at $2.125 million. That was a strong year comparatively speaking to the last several. This doesn't fluctuate a ton. It did in early years when people were starting to go to high efficiency furnaces and high efficiency lighting. We did see this come down some. It seems to have plateaued a little bit more during the last couple of years. And moving forward into this year, we're about 7,000 ahead of where we were in 2021. And this is collections through the month of November. So this runs a little bit behind schedule. And then there can be a little bit of effect on this depending on when the company files their tax returns. If they file late, it could have a little bit of a seesaw effect and things on this as it's going through. But you don't see a lot on this that way. But we are slightly ahead of where we were last year, but not tons. So it's relatively steady, I would say, in terms of that. We're budgeted at $1,950,000, and we might be maybe $150,000 better than that at the end of this year. It's hard to really pin it down, but when we get a little closer, we'll start putting some actual numbers to projections. Need my little thing at the top to go away. There we go. Okay. The next item is our cable franchise tax. On the cable franchise tax, we have seen a little bit of an erosion of this over the years. So the cable TV can be taxed, but the internet cannot under how the franchise tax statute works on this particular one. So as cable TV has morphed into splitting their bill out into two ways, we've seen some erosion of this over the years. It's not huge erosion, but it does erode away each year. We don't usually get quite as much as we got in the past year. You can see that with just one quarter collected, these come in quarterly, so it'll be another month or so before we get this. We're about $3,500 ahead of where we were last year. That's still within probably 10,000 of where we're going to be ending the year. So we're not seeing a lot, but if that did hold true, that would be the first year that we had a little bit of a gain in this particular revenue source. So we're watching it, but this one's not a huge revenue source, so a little fluctuation doesn't hurt us a lot. But we don't see growth in this. And people might say, my cable bill's going up. Well, some of that's cable and some of that's internet. And the internet we don't get this tax on. Any questions on that particular tax? Okay. So the Class C roads, this is a tax that is applied per gallon of fuel sold. And so when you buy your fuel, wherever you buy your fuel in the state of Utah, there's a tax that's applied to that. It's about around 30-some cents a gallon. Of that, some goes to the state, some goes to the local area where you buy that. And I think that they do a little bit of messing around with that in terms of where vehicles are registered and stuff, but I don't know the exact calculation of how that all works. But this is distributed to us. We've collected actually 6 periods through this point in time. We, for some reason, got 2 of them lumped together here this year, and that does happen sometimes in those early months when we're recording that. But we've recorded 6 periods. We're 57.08% of our budget. Our budget is just $7,000 less than what we received last year. However, we're $97,000 ahead of last year. Now, some of that can be that this last year was the pandemic year where a lot of travel for about 2 or 3 month period really slowed down. And then after we figured out that, you know, you could do some different things, the travel started to go back up and we had some recovery. And I think that this year you're seeing kind of the remaining portion of that recovery that went through the end of summer and the early stages of fall, that which would all be included in this number here that shows us $97,000 ahead of where we were last year. So we could be slightly ahead. But again, it can be very volatile. If gas prices go way up and people decide to drive less, that can come down. So we'll watch this as it goes through the year and see where we think it's going to go. But right now it's heading in a positive direction.
So Scott, gas prices have pretty much doubled in a year. Is that why we're higher?
No,
Or is it more travel?
it's based on gallons. So
Just gallons
just
only?
gallons. So actually you would think that as gas prices go up,
It
we
would go
see
down.
less.
Yeah.
Because people would be price conscious to the effect of that on their
We're
dollar.
still driving more.
We're still driving more but you've got to remember back in like the early stages of 2020 that carried out a little bit beyond into early 2021, there was a lot less travel going on. I'll call it elective travel, you know, and even going back and forth to work, we saw a reduction of that during times of that, people who could work from home. And we're seeing some recovery from that. But I also think people are cooped up and they're trying to get out and do things locally to a degree that they can. So maybe they'll travel, I don't know, you know, within an hour, 2 hours away from their house, go up in the mountains, different things along these lines. And so that's consuming some of that fuel that generates this particular revenue line item. But if gas prices went to say $6 a gallon, I do think you would see some reduction in this revenue. So now let's hope that doesn't happen. The general fund expense, this takes all general fund expense. So in the budget category, the blue is where we set our budget initially. And then this gold kind of color here, I think it's gold up here, that's our budget adjustment that we did in October. Most of that deals with the American Rescue Plan funds that's flowed through to us that came in, and that's predominantly what is included in that number. Again, some of those funds that are included in our expenses here, probably about $750,000. I was kind of talking to Tim earlier today, trying to quantify a little bit what that is. And we're about $750,000 that we've actually paid out in terms of costs associated with that American Rescue Plan funds that are up here. So we're about $999,000 ahead of where we were last year at this point in time, but a significant portion of that is associated with those expenditures. We do also have every year, the cost to have an employee goes up slightly. It's not huge and astronomical, but it does go up. And so that's going to be reflected in here. And so in almost every year that you maintain your employment level and you maintain your service level, you'll see gradual increases in expenditures as that moves on. So that's something to keep in mind. The only way to really affect that is to change the service level, change the number of employees. And I say employees because employee costs, salary and benefits is the largest single cost that we have as a city. It's been a little bit since I've looked at it, but we're probably about $9 million of our $20 million general fund budget is employees cost. So to keep that in mind and stuff.
Well, that would also, but we not included in that would be what we pay UFA, which is again, a large
Yes.
chunk of that
Yes,
portion of their payment also goes to their employees.
very true.
and other
Because we
contracts.
pay UFA about $4 million, give or take a little bit each year. And so a high number of that, probably, 60-70% is going to be salaries for them. So, and that wouldn't be included, or well, 2 million of that, the expenses to date would be included in that. But as Councilman Bracken points out, there's going to be salary and benefits included in that as well. But we do go up each year, but we're not, as I look at each of the individual departments and even divisions within the departments, I'm not seeing anywhere where I have concerns that we're, out of whack or anything. If I did, I would talk to Tim initially, and we would talk to a department director, and we would go through that and of course bring it to your attention as well. But I'm not seeing anything at this point in time that's causing me concern as we move through. Looking at revenues, just for a quick kind of a side note to expense, revenues come in really weird through the year. They don't just come in a nice steady fashion. Our property taxes come in about a 2-month period between November and December. We get about 95% of our property taxes. And sometimes that spills over into January, depending on some of the timing of the distributions and different things that we get. So looking at expenses, we kind of go up, I'll call it uniformly and evenly each, as we go through. When you look at revenues, it doesn't go that way. So I'm not going to show you the revenues other than the components that I've shown you as we've gone through. And I don't have any concerns of the revenues that are going. We're not going to be short in a way that I'm going, oh no, we better bring this to the council's attention. So far, we're just seeing very positive results in terms of sales tax, and even all the other forms. We're slightly ahead of where we were last year and or slightly ahead of the budget. So are there any questions of any of the things or any other areas that you might want to see as we move forward? Okay. Well, just remember on the website, all that information is out there. It's available for the public to look at, for each of you to look at. If you deleted an email that came that had a monthly financial report and you're like, dang, I wish I had that, it's going to be out there. And we keep them until we publish the annual financial reports. Then we kind of take them off the website because there's not a need to keep the monthlies at that point in time. So
This might be the banker talking in me, but Doug asked about headwinds a little bit to watch for. We know that this year the Fed has 3 interest rate hikes planned, and the purpose for a short-term interest rate hike is to slow a overheating economy, which causes inflation, which we know we're in. And so seeing 3 different interest rate hikes this year could slow down the economy. So and that's what it's meant to do, to make it not overheat, inflation go out of control. So that'll be something to watch this year together.
yeah, for sure. And I'm sure if you're really interested, I usually listen, usually about once a month. There's an economic update sponsored by Zions Bank, who is our bank entity. It's free to attend. And so if it's something that you are interested in, let Tim know and to get back to me, and I can let him know when those are available. They usually have an economic aspect looking kind of backwards into current, and then they have a forward looking aspect as they do that. And it can be good. I also go to other trainings where they usually include some kind of an economic impact. And I'll tell you this, the whole Rocky Mountain West area is doing extremely well, comparatively speaking, to the country as a whole. I think the country as a whole is doing okay, but we are doing better than the average for sure. So
I think with these increasing interest rates, when we look at different projects that we have, it's important to time when we lock into different things, and you probably keep a very close eye on that so that we can make that that say go on certain things at certain times, just to mitigate some of the downside to the higher rates.
yeah, we don't do a lot, but when we did our refinancing back in October,
Yeah, that's what I
we
thought.
only missed the absolute bottom lowest rates by about literally 2 weeks. We were right there, but we weren't quite ready to close on it at that point in time, but we got really good rates. So it's not like it was the end of the world. Moving forward, as we talked about the Public Works building, I'll just say, based on what the mayor just outlined, 3 potential Fed rate hikes in this year, the earlier you go, the better off you'll be from an interest rate perspective. Of course, I fully know and understand you have to be very comfortable before you go spending, in that case, $6 million. So, there is a little bit of a trade-off as you go through some of that process. And we're not looking like, say 7% interest rates or something crazy like that. So if we were looking at that, I would say, let's get moving, kind of thing. But interest rates are likely to go up as we go through the year, and that will affect financing on any of those types of projects that we may do, including if we decided to say bond and do some construction projects or other things like that, not related to buildings, but maybe roads or other things like that. So, okay, any other questions?
Well, thank you, Scott. I mentioned in the work session how blessed we are as a city to have your leadership on the finance side, and thank you for all that you do and to keep us on top of such an important topic of what we do budget-wise. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, so our next item is 5.2, which will be a unified fire report from our Assistant Chief Riley Pilgrim, who's actually traveling and enjoying. Looks like he's going to enjoy some better weather than us in the next few days, but he's going to be online, and we'll let him present to us from there.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm heading down to St. George. We have usually this third week of January, they do a winter fire school for all the fire departments in Utah. And part of that's a state chiefs meeting, a business meeting. So we try to get as many of the state chiefs or the fire chiefs in the state as possible together to kind of talk about current fire service issues. And this meeting is always an important one because it's at the beginning of the legislative session. So we're able to kind of capture some of the interests and concerns with the current legislation and things that might be proposed. So I'm heading down there, and we'll see if the weather's any nicer than it is up north. So but what I have for you tonight is the quarterly report for Q4, which will encompass October to December in Cottonwood Heights. And so I'll pull that up real quick. And then I'll forward this to Paul afterwards and make sure everyone has a copy of it so you can review it again. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know during the presentation or when we finish. So for the new council members, we typically will do these reports at the end of every quarter just to kind of give a status update of the ongoings in Cottonwood Heights and with our response and just where we're at with things. So starting off, we look at our call volume within the city. For the last quarter, we had 559 incidents. Of those 559, we classified 55 as emergent. And what that means is a lights and sirens response. So about 10% of our calls actually necessitate, just off of dispatch details, that we respond with lights and sirens. With the new dispatching protocols that they have in place, we've dropped our emergent responses significantly. For us, that's a good thing. And for the community, that's a good thing because usually these are where a lot of mishaps happen with accidents or other things. And so when we can reduce the actual need for us to go lights and sirens, that's usually a good thing. The caveat to this is our captains or officers also have the discretion that if they hear something from the dispatch that kind of piques their interest or raises concern for them, they can opt to go lights and sirens. So even though it may not be dispatched as emergent, if they hear something in the call details, they can always change that response. So we trust our captains to make that call. It's definitely a judgment call, but if they feel they need to get there quicker, they have the right to do so. But this is pretty standard for the last few quarters that we've looked at. Cottonwood Heights is typically between 550 to 580 calls per quarter. And we'll have more information on this in the next few meetings. We'll be coming in to present kind of the member fee for Cottonwood Heights. And a lot of that deals with the call volume that we've had over the last year. We're finalizing those numbers now. For comparison, we like to look at just where we are today versus the last 4 years. And again, nothing really stands out. Obviously, Cottonwood Heights is getting busier. You'll definitely see an increase in calls just across the board. But for us, we're well within the response capacities and capabilities that we want for the city. We'd have to see a pretty significant increase in calls to start looking at some other options. But right now, we're averaging about 180 calls per month. We're in pretty good shape as far as service delivery goes. One thing we like to do, so all of our data comes from a software program called Intera. Intera will basically populate all of the calls that have occurred in Cottonwood Heights and any of our municipalities. And then what it'll do is it'll take out the top call types, usually the top 5. Within Cottonwood Heights, you'll see over the last quarter, we had 6 mobile property fires, so usually a vehicle or an RV or something that's not a stationary property. 5 structure fires outside, typically a trash, rubbish, or other fire. Now, when you see the structure fires, that's a lot. I mean, 5 is quite a few. That doesn't necessarily mean a fully involved house. That typically means the crew showed up and they did see signs of a fire. It could be just a room and contents, a single room in a home. It could be just a small part of the home that's on fire. So that doesn't necessarily mean 5 fully involved house fires, but just when the crew showed up, they did indicate or discover a fire on scene. And I believe I think we had 1 active working fire. But these are pretty standard numbers for a community the size of Cottonwood Heights. If I saw a spike in any of these, we definitely be paying a little bit closer attention. And all these are even cause for attention, but nothing out of the ordinary stands out with what we're seeing here. So the next one is medical calls. And so again, for the newer council members, a lot of the calls that we go on are medical calls or public service calls. So we probably spend about 80 to 85% of our call volume will go towards non-fire related things. So it could be medical call, let's say a call for assistance or help. Then 15% or so will be classified as fire. And that's kind of a national average as well. Again, not too uncommon for Cottonwood Heights, but the falls are typically our number 1 call. Sick person, could be anything. It's just classified with dispatch as somebody's not feeling well in terms of a cold. COVID's been a big one, the flu, or anything where someone feels like they're not doing well and they need to be transported to the hospital. Breathing problems are fairly common. And at this time, we definitely see an increase in traffic incidents just with the weather, the roads, and just a lot of people moving about, especially during the holidays, which is in this 4th quarter. So again, we'll look at this as the fire agency. We'll see if there's anything that stands out to us. If there is anything of concern, we start seeing a spike in a certain area, we'll definitely reach out to, if it's like a long-term care facility or, someone who provides a service like that, will typically offer up other resources or make sure that, things are going well there. But again, with the population base and what we're seeing here, nothing too out of the ordinary that causes much concern. The next one, we have our top other dispatches, and this is kind of a collective of the calls that don't necessarily fall into fire response or medical response, but just kind of our other category. And we spend a good chunk of our time to, for not on medical calls, these, and then fire makes up the rest of that 15%. Unintentional detectors are typically a malfunction or a false alarm, or somebody may have accidentally pulled the alarm, or there wasn't an intentional reason for that alarm to be activated. A lot of these do happen in churches, schools, sometimes the care facilities, and our captains do a pretty good job at education. We make sure that, if this is malicious and, somebody did it to play a joke or something like that, we'll typically visit with the person to make sure that they understand the severity of those kind of actions, because they're going to get a full response typically, depending on the facility and what's going on there. If it's, like, say, a care center, somewhere that has a lot of population, and a full response for us is typically a ladder truck and 3 or 4 engines and a battalion chief. So these are something we take pretty serious. Public service assistance could be a lot of different things: changing batteries in a smoke detector, unlocking a door for somebody, anything that doesn't really fall into an emergency that we're just helping somebody out is usually our public service. No, those are usually pretty high numbers too. We go in quite a few of those. And we partner with law enforcement. Usually one of us will get there first and we'll try to solve the problem before the other gets there. Then electrical equipments, typical small fires, often when people catch those when they're home. detector malfunctions where they may just be a problem with old equipment or something's not working well. And then spills and leaks are typically small incidents where it's 2 gallons or less, and it's just somebody's called us to come address it or make sure there's not a bigger problem there. So with these, I've not seen anything that really stands out as too concerning. This is pretty standard for, again, the city with the population of Cottonwood Heights. So our calls are pretty on par with what we'd expect to see. This number is pretty important, and we'll explain this in more detail when we come in with kind of the member fee update and as you prepare for your budget. We do a pretty good job at tracking every incoming and outgoing response that comes into Cottonwood Heights. So, and Cottonwood Heights is a direct member, the call volume sometimes will impact the member fee. And so we watch these very closely and make sure we're capturing this 100% accurate. And so with Cottonwood Heights, your units, so Station 116, which is up on Wasatch, and Station 110, which is right there on Fort Union, just before Highland Drive. Those 2 stations are covering the majority of the calls that happen in Cottonwood Heights. And that's exactly what we want to be seeing. Then Midvale, since they're the next closest, will typically be coming in, and then 12 would capture maybe a Holiday, a Sandy, a Murray, or somebody else who's in the area. But with the units we have in Cottonwood Heights, they're covering over 90% of the calls, which is really a positive thing. We really like that. The ambulance is a little bit different. The ambulances, we look at those as a regional service. Over time, we've discovered in the fire service that having a paramedic on every corner, though it sounds appealing, isn't always the best option. The paramedics go on less calls, their skills are less sharp, and sometimes the service actually isn't as good. You might get someone there really quick, but it may not be, somebody who's as skilled as where we have it set up now, where every unit we have has a paramedic on it. So no matter what, when something shows up, there's a paramedic there. What we've done with the ambulance is, as long as we have a heavy apparatus or someone who can initiate care, we can wait a little bit longer for the paramedics to get there on the ambulance. So what we've done is in Cottonwood Heights, you have one ambulance at Station 110 on Fort Union. Then the next closest ambulance is in Midvale, where there's one at Station 126, which is about 7th East and Fort Union. And then Holiday has an ambulance as well. But you'll see that the Cottonwood Heights ambulance is still covering almost 80% of the calls going on within the city. And that too is something that we're pretty happy with. We're getting really top-notch service, and our paramedics are sharp. They're doing a great job, and because we're spreading that workload a little bit more, everybody's getting a lot of more experience, and we're feeling really good about the service delivery that's coming into the city. So right here it shows a pretty good number as far as the responses go. And again, we watch these really closely. It's important to us that the units within Cottonwood Heights are covering the majority of the calls. And like I say, when we look at this is lining up with about where we want to be. So this number is pretty important too, and it's something that we're constantly working on. And so this only applies to those calls which I shared earlier, our lights and sirens calls. So within the 50th percentile, so 50% of our calls or greater, we're getting there, or less, we're getting there in 5 minutes and 48 seconds. And so a good number there is typically 4 to 6 minutes. We're a little high on that end, but again, that just deals with population density and traffic and navigating ourselves those calls safely. Then below 90% of the time, we're getting there in 8:30. So that also captures that 50th percentile. For fire responses, this is a pretty good number. Again, we want to get there as quickly as possible. And with medical, any kind of emergent medical need, we want to have somebody there as soon as we can get there. The nice thing about our police department is they can also assist us with this. Based off of not being stationary, they're a lot of times close to some of these calls and are able to get there before we are and initiate at least some basic care or evacuations of the building or whichever until our fire crews can get there. So we really value that relationship, and we have a very strong partnership between police and fire in Cottonwood Heights, and our on the ground resources, our crews and our officers are doing such a great job at collaborating and getting these calls and making a difference early on, which is really, really awesome and what we want to be providing to our communities. So there's two different maps I'd like to show you. This one's kind of a scatter plot map. And like I said, I'll share this with you so you can see it a little bit closer. But you'll notice that each dot represents a color. So the red are fire, the greenish are fire alarm. A hazmat 8 would be those small spills that we talked about earlier, traffic incidents. And so I'll let you look at it when I send it out. And where we're seeing the dense, the higher call volume is typically our more despopulated areas. So again, nothing too concerning here as far as what we're seeing. It just shows, a lot of our calls do happen in either communal living where you have apartment complexes or, care facilities. Those are typically higher generated call places, right? We'll see more calls in those areas. We are working on this. Our data kind of came over with some missing details. So we do have 24 calls that aren't classified on the map, but are classified elsewhere. And we're working with VEC and our dispatching software to make sure we're capturing all that. But this paints a pretty good picture of where the calls are actually happening in Cottonwood Heights. And then similar to a lot of the law enforcement maps, we can also create a heat map where the darker the color, the more density of the call volume we have. And so even these lighter circles, it may only indicate, 5 or 6 calls, but just because of how the call volume spread out, you'll see kind of those little patches throughout the city. And those are typically again associated with higher density population areas. Any questions on the call data before we move into updates?
No.
Okay. So as far as updates go, I know the mayor and Tim Teen, you heard these earlier today. I'll kind of share just some things that are going on within the organization for the rest of the council. Kind of an exciting event. We've entered or completed the first year of our second strategic plan. So our first strategic plan for the organization, even though we're 100 years old, the first actual plan that we really had to provide strategic direction was formulated in 2018. And we just wrapped that one up at the end of 2020. Then we started our new plan in 2021, and we encompass about 3 years. I feel like 3 years gives us really good content. We have actionable items that we can accomplish over 3 years. They don't get stale, and it really motivates our divisions to work hard towards these initiatives and these the goals. A lot of things that we focus on are community driven. So the way we develop our plan is we survey our employees, but more importantly, we survey our external partners and our communities. And we want to find out what they value because we want our service to match the things that the communities value and what they see are important to them from their fire service. And so based off of the information we gather from our communities, we'll develop our strategic plan. And then our divisions, so our medical division, logistics, our operations section, we have multiple divisions with the organization. All of their action items, their initiatives that go into building the budget are geared towards meeting the things that are important to our communities. So our strategic plan really drives our budget development. It drives where our intent goes. It drives where our efforts go, and it really ensures that the funds that are provided to our organization are being used for things that our communities value and that they're going towards our response and making sure that we're providing the highest level of service to all of our communities. It's important to us. We want to make sure that we're staying close to the plan. We try not to deviate it too far from it, and it's pretty encompassing of a lot of things. We're looking at behavioral health and wellness of our employees, community engagement, professional development, improvements in response. A lot of things that really, when we invest in our employees, it also helps them provide better service to our communities. So something that's really important to us, and we'll continue to do this. And I'm happy to share this too. I can attach the plan when I share the slideshow, so everyone has a chance to kind of look that over. So that's a big accomplishment. Our first year is completed. When we did our report out today, we had 161 action items over the 3-year period, and we've completed about 25% which we're pretty happy with. So about 39 to 40 of our items have been completed over the last 8 or so months, which is pretty neat. A lot of those really began in July with our new budget. So did quite a bit of work in just the last 6 to 8 months in the strategic plan. And also kind of an exciting event. Chief Peterson, who's been here since the beginning of 2017, is retiring at the end of March. And so we're actually currently in the process of selecting the next fire chief. That process will run from now, middle of January, to the middle of March. And so on March 15th, the board will take a look at the final candidates and we'll make a determination. Then the goal would be on April 2nd to have the new chief selected. Well, new chief selected on March 15th and then in place on April 2nd when Chief Peterson officially retires. And just kind of a personal note here, Chief Peterson's definitely been a great asset to the organization. He came at a time where we definitely needed a change of command and a new direction and some kind of new life in the organization. And he came in and really provided that. He's made a lot of positive changes and he's really motivated and encouraged and developed and helped all of us be successful to take the organization to the next step when he leaves. So we're grateful for everything he's brought to the organization and we're looking forward to what the future holds. So as of right now, I believe there's 3 candidates who put in for the position. So we're excited to see how that goes.
Is
And
that
I may or may
strictly, an internal process? Are they looking elsewhere or is it going to be hired from within the organization?
This one is all internal. So there's 3 candidates they felt were qualified to proceed in the process internally. The board does have the option, the ad hoc committee does have the option that those 3 candidates, they don't have the comfort or the confidence in one of those 3, they can go external as well. And there's a plan in the event that that does happen, but we're pretty confident that one of the 3 people who put in will definitely have the skills necessary to lead it into the next phase of the organization. So it'll be an exciting process. Really the first time since he's come in, we've done that. A lot of times it's just been kind of an appointment inside, but the competition and having the board involved at the level they are is really an exciting thing. It's definitely going to ensure we get the best person in place. Recruitment, we're just wrapping up our recruitment. We do start a new recruit camp in February. So we are going to be looking at moving about 30 people into that camp, or 32, depending on if we get the 6 more offers out there. We had a few people that some military obligations and some other conflicts. And so we're trying to get to the 32 recruits, but it may be 30. We'll know here in the next year or 2. I think we have 2 outstanding offers. Exciting with this is we have 8 new paramedics, and right now paramedics are definitely a hot commodity. It's difficult to get enough paramedics out there. And a lot of those have moved on through retirements or promotions, and so they're not necessarily functioning solely as a paramedic. And so it's a good thing when we promote those individuals, but we also want to make sure we have people in the background ready to take their place. So that's always something we'll be striving to recruit is paramedics. They offer such a valuable and critical service to our communities, and you know, that's a really important position. We want to make sure we're always prepared to continue filling. So this is kind of similar to law enforcement, where across the valley and even across the state, we're seeing a really high demand for paramedic recruitment. And we haven't had any trouble retaining paramedics. We've actually had a lot of success bringing paramedics into our organization from other places. But yeah, paramedics are definitely, because of the time it takes to go through school and get the skill set, that's a little bit more difficult position to replace when somebody promotes or moves on. So it's about a 9-month period of school and education and then ride-alongs. And so about 18 months or so is what it takes to really get a paramedic who's confident in their skills and is really comfortable functioning on their own. So it takes quite a bit of time and development to get there. And then moving on, we have a lot of construction going on. So as we're sharing our meeting today, we have Station 125 in Midvale and Station 102 in Magna, which are under construction right now. And we have a few others that are being planned and conceptualized. Then within Cottonwood Heights, Stations 110 and 116 are both receiving seismic upgrades to ensure they're ready for anything that could happen, in the event of an earthquake or an emergency. So that's pretty exciting. That's been a lot of work to get to this point, and now we're able to retrofit the stations and make sure they're ready to go in the event of an emergency. I do have a brief, let's see if I can get it to pull up. This is kind of a neat thing that we did out in Magna. Instead of a traditional groundbreaking, we did a demolition. And so I can show this real fast. Pretty neat way though to celebrate kind of the ending of era and the bringing in of a new station.
Riley, didn't they find out that was the wrong building?
Oh boy. Yeah, that would not be good.
When they woke that
But yeah, this was kind of unique because this is one of the stations that we're building on site. Some of the other ones we've been able to acquire new land. With this one in Magnus, it's actually located in a really good spot. And so it's necessary to move the crew from this station to a neighboring station and then begin the demolition and rebuilding of this building. So pretty exciting. The station's been around since the 70s. It was obviously built to code then, but the standards have changed and it was necessary. This one had a lot of wear and tear. It had some impacts from the last earthquake, nothing significant, but enough that it was time for this one to be upgraded and turned into a new facility. So pretty neat for our organization, pretty exciting to be able to continue building and moving forward like this. So then just a few items to note here. Captain Gehring actually retired out of Cottonwood Heights. So he was at Station 116 for several years. His son is a captain now here at the organization. And some interesting facts about him. He responded to 9/11. He's one of our responders who's out there as a chaplain. And he's heavily involved in our urban search and rescue program, which is a federal and national resource. Just a great human being. He was an awesome public servant and will definitely be missed. He had a lot of contributions. And I say his last 3 or 4 years were spent at Station 116 Cottonwood Heights. And so it's pretty awesome to be able to recognize somebody like Captain Gehring, and pretty cool that he's been able to pass that on to his son, who's again a captain who's out in Taylorsville right now. So I've worked with both of those individuals and they're great humans. It's awesome to have people like that in the organization. Captain Morgan, he also spent time at Station 110 when we had the heavy rescue program there. He retired recently out of Mill Creek. And again, long time paramedic, worked a lot of years in Cottonwood Heights when we said our heavy rescue program was stationed out of there and did a lot of good work too. He's definitely another person who's going to be missed. And his son also works here. So Kathy just recently retired. She worked all throughout the valley, and her recent job was in our medical division. So training our paramedics. So again, a really important job that, we have to make sure we have, the great people in our medical division to ensure our paramedics are getting top-notch training. And then Carla was also in our medical program. She managed our controlled substances, which for UFA is a pretty big deal. We manage a lot of our narcotics for our paramedics, and it takes a high level of scrutiny, and somebody has an eye for detail to ensure that we're following all the laws and regulations. And so she did a great job there. And then our IT manager also left, which we've had challenges keeping that IT position filled. It's definitely a challenging spot, especially in the public safety organization. So that job's actually currently open for recruitment, and we are seeking a new IT manager. So that's it for the presentation. Thanks for bearing with me. Is there any questions on anything that we shared?
Doesn't look like it. Chief.
Awesome. And we'd love to get the new council members as acquainted with and familiar with the organization as possible. That's something I'll work with Tim on, and the mayor's your representative on the board. But any questions you have, feel free to pass them to Tim, and we can get those addressed as quickly as possible. So.
Well, Chief Pilgrim, thank you. I actually want to echo your words about Chief Peterson. I've talked to multiple individuals that just, he basically has helped turn around this agency, and it's going to be missed, but it's a good time for a new leader to come in and make their mark as well. And we're grateful for Chief Pilgrim. He, at the UFA board meeting this morning, it was interesting to see, Riley is one of 3 assistant chiefs to Chief Peterson. And to see the big role that he plays within the agency and to be our liaison is a great thing for our city. And so we appreciate you, Riley, and for all you do for us, and thanks for your report.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. The next item on the agenda is our action items. There are 4 items of legislation outlined on our agenda. The first item is Ordinance 374, amending the city's code of ordinances concerning automatic fire sprinkler systems. And Mike, are you?
Yeah, I can just address this very
Okay.
quickly. This has been discussed at the council a couple times. It's at the request of Unified Fire. We've brought forward an amendment to the city code that clarifies that for homes over 10,000 square feet, an automatic fire sprinkler system is required. That would be required during the building permit review process. There are a few exceptions, and they are enumerated in the proposed ordinance in front of you. The one thing I want to note is we did have a lot of this language in our code already that Shane was able to find when he was preparing this. So we're just supplementing the language that was existing. And Unified Fire has reviewed the proposed language and is supportive of it.
Great, thank you. At this point, I will call for a motion on Ordinance 374.
I move that we approve ordinance 374, Mayor.
I'll second.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson called the motion, and a second with Councilmember Newell. Is there any other questions or discussion on this ordinance? Okay, I'll now call for the vote. Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken,
Yes.
Councilmember Newell,
Yes.
Councilmember Burrell,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Okay, the next item is consideration of resolution 2022-05, approving a public opinion research services agreement with Y2 Analytics. Tim, you want to?
Yes, this is something that's outlined in your packet. We talked about it in the work session. It's a professional services agreement to have Y2 Analytics do a community survey. It would be a scientific survey with respondents randomly selected to participate in that. Approximately 800 to 1,000 interviews is what we're anticipating. The cost is $15,600, which is under budget. The budget was approved as part of this budget cycle. So we're recommending approval of this professional services agreement and look forward to having them come back and talk with you about the survey instrument, the questionnaire, which they will do at another time.
Thank you. Okay, I'll now call for a motion on resolution 2022-05 that we approve.
He did move that we approved. Did you hear it? His voice is a little weak.
Just
And I would
me.
like to second that.
Great, thank you. We have a move to approve resolution 2022-05 by Councilmember Bracken and a second by Councilmember Peterson. I will do any other questions or discussion on this resolution? If not, I will call for the vote. Councilmember Bracken, Yes. Councilmember Newell,
Yes.
Councilmember Burrell,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Next is 6.3, consideration of resolution 2022-06, approving an agreement with Brown's Amusement, Inc. for the Butlerville Days Carnival. Scott, you want
Oh,
to talk about anything of that?
Yep.
Or
go ahead if you want. You want me to?
No, we're hopeful that this summer we can get back to a Butlerville days like what we had seen a couple of years ago. Part of that is Carnival. Browns has provided the service before. This is a 3-year agreement. They tend to be a net revenue generation. They share some of the proceeds. They have a floor, and then any additional they share with the city that goes into the Butlerville days activities.
Great, thank you. I will now call for a motion on resolution 2022-06.
I move to accept resolution dash 2022-06.
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Newell has moved to approve resolution 2022-06, and Councilmember Bracken has seconded it. Any other questions or discussion on this resolution? If not, I will call for a vote. Councilmember Newell,
Yes.
Councilmember Burrell,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken,
Yes.
and I will vote. Our last item of legislation is consideration of resolution 2022-07, approving entry into a consulting agreement with TO Engineers, Inc. for stormwater system services. Do you want to address that for us?
Mayor and council, thank you. This item has actually been before you previously, or it's the previous council with TO Engineers. This is for our stormwater system, our manhole identification, our system survey, and upgrading on our stormwater model. It was signed previously by the council and approved. After that, there was some issues with TO Engineers legal counsel on some issues with the agreement. I will turn that time over to Shane to explain that, but we're bringing this back for approval to move forward with that contract as originally signed, I believe, in November.
The issue that we ran into with TO Engineers Legal Counsel was concerning an indemnification provision where the city was requiring the provider to indemnify the city from any ill effects of the performance of their services. TO wanted to basically what I would call eviscerate that provision. We held firm on that and sent the message to them that we needed to do it the city's way. We ended up making some inconsequential changes to give them a way to save some face, and they accepted our proposal, and so I've now signed the agreement. So now it's before the council. I think that the indemnification provision has turned out exactly how the city would want it.
Thank you, Shane. We appreciate your leadership on this, and Matt as well. Thank you. I will now call for a motion on a resolution 2022-07.
I will motion to approve resolution 22-07.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Councilmember Burrell moved to approve resolution 2022-07, and we got a second from Councilmember Peterson. Any other questions or discussions on this resolution? With that, I will call for a vote. Councilmember Burrell,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken,
Yes.
Councilmember Newell,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Okay. Our next item is in considering approval of the minutes from January 3rd, which was our swearing in ceremony, and January 4th, our city council meetings. Could I have a motion to approve these minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
And I second that.
We have a movement to approve from Councilmember Newell and a second from Councilmember Peterson. Let's proceed with a voice vote. All in favor of approving these minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that includes the items on tonight's agenda. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Oh. I was about to do it, and I second that motion.
A motion to adjourn by Councilmember Bracken and a second from Councilmember Peterson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we are adjourned.